Good morning, everyone. This is Courtney Madden from ENA. Thank you for joining our webinar on the Conditional Interactivity process. Thank you for your patience while we give everyone some time to enter their registration details and log in. I'm here with Will Bowen from UKPN, who will be presenting today. We also have Peter from Western Power and Rashmi from National Grid ESO joining us as panelists. Thank you for your patience. I'll be handing over to Will shortly.
Hello everybody, this is Will Bowen from UK Power Networks. Apologies for the slight delay while we were just getting the webinar up and running. You should be able to see a slide at the moment that says housekeeping. Just to summarise there, we've got at the moment your microphones will be muted, and it will be muted for the duration of the webinar. So if we can ask you to use the Q&A function that you should see on your sidebar, rather than the chat function to ask any questions during the course of the webinar. Peter Aston will be supporting me on the presenting the webinar, and Peter may well be able to answer any questions as and when we go along, or if appropriate, Peter might chip in and we can stop and review and answer a question as we go along. But certainly we'll try and answer any questions during the course of the webinar. Any questions that we don't have time to discuss during the webinar, or questions that require considered response, or even ones that are asked after the webinar, we will send out and communicate at a later date. So at the moment, just to be clear, we are recording this webinar with the intention of uploading it onto the ENA website for reference later on. And there's an email address there at the bottom of the page that you can contact us if you've got any questions about the webinar or about the subject. So this is the Workstream 2 Product 3 Industry Interactivity Process webinar. My name is William Bowen. I work for UK Power Networks, and today I'm presenting on behalf of the Workstream 2 Product 3 Working Group. So I'll briefly skip through the agenda here. We're going to, I think we've done the introductions and the housekeeping. We'll go through the objectives of the webinar and the outcome of the July 2019 consultation. We're then going to talk a little bit about conditional interactivity, an introduction to interactivity and the key features of conditional interactivity. Then we'll take you through an end-to-end illustration of how that process works in a fairly straightforward scenario. We'll then cover a number of points in a little bit more detail of conditional interactivity, a little bit more detail on what we mean by conditional and unconditional offers, the process and considerations for acceptance and allocation, and then we'll look briefly at reapplications and queue position for customers that are not successful. What I will then do, there's a slide that summarises what we've talked about, and I'll probably just pause there for a couple of minutes to give myself a chance to catch my breath, and we may have an opportunity to answer any questions at that point. And then I will take you through 7 scenarios, illustrated scenarios, just to try and bring to life a little bit what the conditional interactivity process means. And then at the end we'll stop again for Q&As, and perhaps myself and Peter that will be the opportunity to cover off anything that we can that's been raised in the webinar. And then very briefly I'll just outline what the next stages are for this process. So So the outcome of the July 2019 consultation. In July 2019, the ENA presented a minded to position for interactivity, the conditional interactivity approach, in a published ENA consultation. The responses were significantly in support of the proposal for all network companies, transmission and distribution, to adopt the conditional interactivity process. The ENA has since developed the principles and processes for conditional interactivity and drafted a guide. And this webinar presents key aspects of the conditional and interactivity process, and we're seeking feedback prior to finalising and publishing the guide in March. So, conditional interactivity, an introduction. What is interactivity? A network company may receive 2 or more applications for a connection which would make use of the same part of the existing or future network, but where not all applicants can be connected due to restrictions. For example, limited network capacity is the main one, but there's also fault levels or physical limitations, for example, space. These are examples of such restrictions. Those applications will be considered interactive with each other, and the interactive process is a method by which network companies determine which application is successful. Why is an interactive process needed? It's to ensure that decisions made in how applications for connection are allocated are transparent, consistent, simple enough to administer in large numbers, and fair. So, key features of conditional interactivity. When interactivity is triggered, the applications are queued. The application that is first in the interactive queue has first refusal on the connection. They are considered unconditional. Later applications depend on some or all of the earlier applications not being accepted. They are conditional. Applicants will be given early warning that they are interactive, and connection offers are issued in normal timescales and will be issued as conditional or unconditional as appropriate. There is no moratorium period. Interactive offers are issued with 30 days validity. Okay, so now this slide here will gradually build up. This is the format that we'll see the scenarios in a little bit later on. You've got a timeline there from left to right. There's a timeline there from left to right, and what we illustrate on this timeline is application 1, 2, and 3 have come in at staggered times during that short period of time. Each of those comes into the network company and they will start their offer preparation work. But soon after the second or the third application comes in, the evaluation of the application identifies possible interactivity. So what we're saying at this point, these 3 separate applications cannot all be connected without, for example, reinforcement to the network. At this point, the network companies will send out to each of those applicants a notification of interactivity. It's a heads up. It's a heads up to these customers to say, we're processing your application. However, at the moment, it is interactive and it may be issued as interactive. When the first offer is ready to be issued, it is sent out, but with a validity period reduced to 30 days. The offer that is sent out is marked as unconditional, and like I say, the validity period for acceptance has been reduced to 30 days. Similarly, with the second offer, this one is now conditional. The conditional offer is sent out, again with a validity period of 30 days, but the conditionality on this second offer is that the first offer is not accepted. Then the third offer, again, is sent out as a conditional offer, and it's sent out with a validity period of 30 days. Now, in this illustration, the second applicant accepts their offer within their own validity period. However, the first offer, the one that is in front of it, has not accepted yet, and it's still within their validity period. And the same that happens with applicant number 3. Applicant number 3 again accepts their conditional one, but their offer is conditional on 1 and 2 not accepting, but we still don't know what's happened with connection offer number 1. That's still within its validity period. And then within the offer 1's validity period, they accept. So the unconditional offer sent to applicant number 1 has been accepted within their validity period. And at that point, we will withdraw offers number 2 and 3 as they are unsuccessful. And going forward, applicant number 1 will be offered that connection. Applicants 2 and 3 would need to reapply again to the network company for their connection. Okay. Okay, so then let's come back, because I've used these words quite a lot in the last couple of minutes: unconditional and conditional. So, they're key concepts to this interactivity process. An unconditional offer is not dependent on any other offer, i.e. it has first refusal, or to put another way, they're at the front of the interactivity queue. Now, the unconditional offer may have already been issued, i.e. with standard terms and validity period, when it became interactive. And in this case, the validity period is reduced to 30 days when the subsequent interactive offer is sent, where more than 30 days remain. That's it. We'll illustrate that on one of the scenarios. That will probably describe that a bit better. Otherwise, the unconditional offer is issued with 30 days. A conditional offer is one that is dependent on some or all of the earlier offers not being accepted. And again, conditional offers are normally issued with the 30 days validity, and where a conditional offer is accepted, the network company will need to validate whether the customer has been successful, i.e. they need to check the status of the previous offers in that interactive queue. But for the avoidance of doubt, no extension will be provided to the validity period on any interactive offer. So that's unconditional and conditional. So I can see some questions coming up here. The reapplication in full, or just a confirmation as a request to new offer. We'll touch upon the reapplication process in a little bit more detail in a few slides' time. And then if acceptance of offer 1 is received at or just before sending offer 2, should the quote still be issued as conditional? What happens if the next offer requires, scroll down, further network, but the LC doesn't allow it? So that is a particular risk to the network companies. But if offer 1 goes out and is accepted before offer 2 is issued, then what the network company will need to do is to provide offer number 2 as a fully costed, for example, with reinforcement offer. And it is a challenge, you're quite right, with LC license condition and GSOP timescales. So in terms of the question here is, DNOs charge for a fee for processing applications if losing out on a conditional offer and then having to reapply as a second fee payable.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I think you would need to check that with each individual network company. I think you're talking there about the advanced A&D fees. You'd have to check with that each of the network companies to confirm that.
Yeah, we've got a lot of questions coming through about the fees here.
Yeah. So in terms of the connection offer expenses, colloquially known as upfront A&D fees, there are slight differences in how that is applied across the network companies. You would need to check with your individual network company as to how they would approach that. Okay. So let's move on to the next. So the next slide is acceptance and allocation. So unconditional offers must be accepted and paid for within the validity period and with the standard network company terms. And this is normally payment in full or part. Depending on the scenario, the network company will withdraw any issued conditional offers. Conditional offers do not require payment until the application is confirmed as successful by the network company. And stage one, so there's two stages for conditional offers. Stage one is the signed acceptance of the connection offer received by the network company within the validity period. If successful, the network company will notify the applicant and would request payment within 10 days. And stage two is payment received by the network company within those 10 days. And if unsuccessful, in either of those scenarios, the conditional offer, the applicant will need to reapply. So all of the references to days in this presentation are working days. Network companies themselves may present this as, all of the references to days in this presentation are calendar days. Some network companies may present this information and talk about it as working days, but then in that case, they will scale down to the appropriate working days. So 10 calendar days or the equivalent working day. Okay. So reapplications and queue position. So network companies will notify unsuccessful applicants once the connection allocation has been confirmed. Customers who accepted their conditional offer to stage one, i.e. acceptance but not payment, but were unsuccessful, will be given the opportunity to retain their queue position. To retain their queue position in any further round of interactivity, customers will need to reapply within 10 days of the notification to maintain. Customers who did not accept stage one will also need to reapply. In the case of any subsequent interactivity, these offers will be given a queue position based on the new application date for distribution or clock start date for transmission. And here we have a note that for all reapplications, there may be an additional charge for this, and customers should check with their relevant network company.
So we had a question come through that, are there any other factors that would influence the application, such as the purpose of connection request priority, for example, medical, defense, or vulnerability purposes? And my understanding is that the answer to that would be no, the only thing that influences it is the application date. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. Okay, so the slide that you're seeing now, it shows a summary of the unconditional and conditional offers. I'll just leave this here for a couple of minutes and we'll check through this, make sure that we've covered off all of the questions, and then I'll start on the scenarios. All right, so there's a question in the chat, which is the interactivity element is applied purely on the basis of admin criteria, i.e. acceptance, non-acceptance of other offers, and not concerned with technical specifications of assets applying for connection. I'm not clear exactly what the question is. In terms of what is and what isn't interactive, there will be a restriction that is identified prior to any of the applications being accepted, which does restrict the network company from connecting both of those applications, both of those connections. So that's kind of identified up front. So there isn't anything that then subsequently happens after that. That's set at that point. So yeah, we'll just try and clarify what that question is. Okay. So is there any more questions here, Courtney, on the questions chat? Thank you everybody for using the questions thing. Especially we've got quite a few different people using the questions function. That's good, and the chat function. That's great.
So we've got a great question here. If an applicant needs to reapply, does it retain the position in the queue from the original application?
So we did just touch upon that. And what we're talking about here is for somebody to be unsuccessful, that means somebody has been successful. And effectively what's happened is that in all likelihood, that connection that was successful will be in a lot of cases, the last connection that can be made in that area without reinforcement or without some sort of investment to allow the second connection on. So, but what may happen is when the applications come in again, there may also be subsequent interactivity at perhaps a higher level or the next step up of reinforcement. So on the basis that the conditional unsuccessful applicant met stage 1, so they've accepted their conditional offer, they weren't required to pay because they were not successful. On the basis that they accepted their stage 1 offer within their validity period, they would keep their original application date or queue position date for any subsequent interactivity. If it occurs, it may well be that there is no subsequent interactivity, and the application date will be there, but you're there effectively at the front of the queue, but there isn't a queue forming. Okay, so that's it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to go through this. There's 7 slides. They're not interactive. They're not interactive like the earlier one that appear as we go along. These have been lifted out of the process guide, and that's where we intend to be publishing. So it's a good opportunity for us to make sure that the scenarios cover what we want and how to get them across in the guide. So let's have a look at this first one, for example. So this scenario just illustrates the early stages of the interactivity process. And you've got the line running through from left to right with an arrow. That's a timeline. And if we start on the left-hand side, the applicant number 1 put their application in, and offer number 1 was sent by the network company with their standard offer with 90 days. Applicant number 2 came in, and at some point soon after applicant 2, the evaluation of the applicant 2 by the network company identifies possible interactivity. So we send out at that point notifications to both parties. We will send it back to applicant 2 to say we're processing your application. Please note that at the moment it may well be issued as interactive. It may well be issued with only 30 days notice on, 30 days validity. So you need to be aware of that. And then we will also inform applicant number 1 that their application is currently potentially interactive, and that we may reduce their validity to 30 days depending on when that happens. So that all happens in that first star on the timeline. If we move along a little bit further, offer number 2 is then sent out. So nothing happens on offer number 1. They're not obliged to pay any earlier at this point. It's still within offer number 1's validity period. We will send out offer number 2. Now at that point, offer number 2 goes out as conditional, and it goes out with 30 days. And at the same moment in time, we will issue a notification to applicant number 1 to say that we've reduced their validity down to 30 days. Now that assumes that there are more than 30 days left. If at that point the applicant number 1 only had 20 days left, for example, we wouldn't extend it to 30 days. It would still be 20 days. And then on the far right, it just illustrates that some of the original validity period is lost due to that interactivity being declared. So the outcome of this particular scenario is when the conditional connection offer is issued with itself with 30 days validity, the previously issued unconditional offer validity is reduced to 30 days. Okay. And scenario number 2 is similar, but this is true in the interactivity where no connection offers have been issued. And in this scenario, 2 applications are received, but no connection offers issued prior to interactivity being triggered. So again, working from left to right, applicant number 1 comes in, the network company commences its offer preparation period. Applicant number 2 comes in shortly afterwards, ditto, start preparing the offer. And soon after that, evaluation of both applications identifies the interactivity between those 2 applicants. Again, we will send out notifications to both parties to say that, and again, it's a heads up, when we come to issuing your offer, it may be interactive and it may only have the 30 days validity on, so please be aware. Offer number 1 is prepared and is sent out as an unconditional offer and issued with 30 days. Soon after that, offer number 2 is issued as a conditional offer, again with 30 days. And you can see there that the relevant validity periods overlap each other. And the outcome of this scenario is that both unconditional and conditional connection offers are issued with validity reduced to 30 days or with validity of 30 days. Okay, so One of the questions we had was, what if the application that is first is not actually quoted first? We'll come to that in a second. If applicant 1 accepts their unconditional but then later cancelled, is applicant 2 notified? Peter's just coming back on that one. And do you mean a reduction to 30 days remaining, not 30 days total? Yeah, 30 days remaining, because offer 1 would have already been issued with some days. Yeah, so where we reduce to 30 days, it would be from that point, 30 days from that point, not 30 days, not reducing 30 days from the point that we issued the offer, which would have been some time prior. Okay, so scenario 3 is triggering interactivity but connection offers not issued in queue order. So in this scenario, 2 applications are received, no offers are issued before interactivity is triggered. In this case, the second application has a shorter guaranteed standard timescale and therefore needs to be issued before the first. This is likely to only happen in distribution, where we have slightly different timescales for guaranteed standards or license condition 15. So again, starting on the left-hand side, applicant number 1 comes in, applicant number 2 comes in, and then the star on the timeline identifies where we consider these 2 applications are interactive with each other. We send out a notification of interactivity to both parties. However, offer number 2, applicant number 2 is on a shorter timescale and is prepared earlier. So offer number 2 is still sent their conditional offer and with 30 days on. There is no change to the conditional or unconditional nature of their offer with respect of when the offer is sent. That is determined by their place in the queue where their application was received. And then a few days after conditional offer number 2 is sent, the unconditional offer number 1 is sent again with the 30 days. So the outcome here is both unconditional and conditional connection offers are issued with the validity reduced to 30 days but out of sequence. However, each retain their relative queue position. Okay. Scenario number 4. An acceptance is received but can't be validated until prior connection offers have lapsed. So in this scenario, a conditional offer is accepted by the customer but cannot be validated until all earlier connection offers have expired. So in this scenario, we start on the left-hand side. So we pick this up from the point that the offers have been sent. So offer number 1 is sent as unconditional. That's the orange one with 30 days. Offer number 2, a conditional is sent. That's the green block. And offer number 3, a conditional offer is sent. That's the blue block. Each of those are sent with 30 days. Soon after offer number 3 is sent, applicant number 3 accepts their offer. However, we cannot confirm at this point. They've met stage 1, so they have sent the network company their signed acceptance. A few days after that, the first offer number 1 expires. That's out. They do not accept their offer within the 30 days, and that expires. However, offer number 3, who accepted, still has offer number 2 in play, if you like. So moving over to EXP2, expire 2. So that green EXP2 is the point in time where offer number 2 expires. At that point, we can then confirm with offer number 3 that they've been successful. We would then contact that customer, applicant number 3, and request payment for that connection. And on receipt of the money, of the payment within the 10 days, that will be confirmed. So the outcome here, a conditional connection offer is validated after all prior offers expire. Okay. I hope I'm not going through these too quickly. building up in complexity. That's the theme. So often, scenario number 5. Scenario 5, an unconditional acceptance is received, all other offers are withdrawn. In this scenario, the unconditional connection offer is accepted and then later all other connection offers are withdrawn. So we have a similar situation. We start off with a similar situation here on the left-hand side. Offer number 1, 2 and 3 have been issued, each with 30 days. Offer 1 is unconditional, 2 and 3 are each conditional on all of the prior not accepting. But within the offer number 1's validity period, they accept. The unconditional offer is accepted and offers 2 and 3 are withdrawn as unconditional offer, as their unconditional offers. Offers 2 and 3 are withdrawn as unconditional offer is accepted. So the validity period on 2 and 3 is lost as unconditional offer has been accepted. Applicants 2 and 3 would retain their queue position if they wanted to apply again. So that's not strictly true there in this scenario because applicants 2 and 3 did not accept. They did not meet stage 1, sorry. The outcome of this is that both conditional connection offers are withdrawn when the unconditional connection offer is accepted. Just check in, see if there's any more questions. Is there anything further down?
Yep, looks like we've
got, if the unconditional offer requires minor reinforcement works, will conditional offers be subject to second comer charges? If unconditional offer requires, okay, so if I'm not sure that there would be, I think in principle, yes, the second comers, the electricity connection charge regs, the second comers will apply when they apply. So it may well be that all of the offers have second comer recovery charges in there for previous reinforcement. But if the unconditional offer includes some reinforcement works, the conditional offers would not necessarily have second comer charges in there because they may well not be successful if the unconditional one accepts. They may have to go through the application process again because they're unsuccessful, and at that point they would have the second comer charges applied. So I think it's a good question. There is an expectation that the second comers are applied when appropriate, and they will be applied on interactive offers as well. So certainly it doesn't remove that option for the network company.
I'm going to check in here as well.
That's the same question here.
Excellent. And there was one that was in the chat as well.
Okay, so we've just got there's a couple of questions here in the chat. So yeah, so the standard validity period, I think for a lot of network companies is 90 days, 90 calendar days. Sometimes it's 180 days. That tends to be for smaller offers, smaller connections. But where I reference the standard validity period, that's what you would normally expect to get from the network company. And generally speaking, it's more than that 30 days that we've been talking about. Yeah. Okay.
And I wanted to touch on this one as well because I don't think we actually read the answer out loud. One of the questions that came through is, if application 1 accepts their unconditional offer but then later cancels, is application 2 notified? Will, do you want to take us through the answer here?
So yeah, it does depend on, it depends on when applicant 1 cancels. If it's a long time after the interactivity period, then applicant 2 wouldn't be notified. If it was cancelled shortly after, days for example, and applicant 2 has reapplied and is still in the interactivity queue, we would probably inform applicant number 2 at that point. So yeah, so if an unconditional offer accepts, and then that, applicants 2 and 3 lose out, we withdraw their offers. If a couple of days later it transpires that applicant 1 would cancel their acceptance, they're not going forward, it may well be that applicants 2 and 3 have reapplied and they would have kept their queue position, and effectively applicant number 2 would then be unconditional on that. But clearly, if applicant 1 cancels 6-12 months after, I think all parties have moved on at that point.
Well, we've got some additional questions that have come through here. So in scenario 5, applicants 2 and 3 want to reapply. It would seem no point applying as before. Do they retain queue position if there's a change to their application?
No. So any reapplications would be based upon the same information from the initial application. So if there is a material change to the customers, to the applications, their original queue position would not be retained. So the queue position is only maintained where it's the same application, same details on the application as was originally put in.
What a good question. That's a very good question. Now another one here. Will this procedure apply to tertiary connections?
Yeah. So the work that we are doing this year, and I mentioned very briefly earlier on about transmission and distribution, the intention is for this process to work within each of the DNO companies, across each of the DNO companies, within the transmission companies, and between transmission and distribution. So in terms of tertiary connections, tertiary winding connections, in case of any interactivity for whatever reason between a transmission customer and a distribution customer, the interactivity process, the intention and the objective of 2020 is to establish this process across those boundaries between DNOs and between distribution and transmission. So yes, it would. The intention is that it would be applied to tertiary connections.
Okay, there's another question in the chat as well. So surely there must be a process when all offers can be issued by carrying out network reinforcement, which will include cost apportionment and second-comer charges. Second-comer charges are based on the reinforcement required for the first application.
So this may be one of the other options that we considered last year as a working group was the worst case first. What we're looking at, this conditional interactivity is best case first. What we present all of the applicants in here is the best case scenario. Generally speaking, here is your connection offer and it doesn't include any reinforcement. However, we may not be able to provide it to you because there's somebody in front of you. It's the best case first approach. What the working group did last year, and it was presented in the consultation as another option, and this other option didn't get much support behind it, hence we went forward with this. The other option was a worst case scenario first, where as soon as something goes interactive, we would include in the connection offers effectively the reinforcement and or an appropriate charge, a second-comer, an apportion charge for that reinforcement, and that's effectively a worst case situation first. It wasn't. It was considered within the working group. We thought that there were some pros. There was some potential advantages to that approach. I think that when it was presented in the consultation, it certainly didn't get much support from the respondents. So we didn't develop that process. So that, and I think that relates to the question that we've been asked here in the chat. So that's a little bit surely must be a process.
Mm-hmm. So by the way, if you could please use the Q&A instead of the chat function, it's much easier for us to read the Q&A and answer the Q&A. So instead of using the chat, pop your questions into the Q&A. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, so there's some reference to this here.
Yes, so there's another question up here. It's just a bit hard for us to see. So applicant 2 and applicant 3 have to wait until the earlier or either the unconditional offer 1 validity period ends or applicant 1 accepts in order to find out whether their conditional offer would still apply or can be confirmed. And this is meant to say, are users 2 and 3 notified of that likely waiting period?
Okay, none. So yes, yes, applicants 2 and 3 will need to wait because they are conditional. They do need to wait until the unconditional offer has resolved, and by resolved I mean has either been accepted or has expired. Yeah, time expired. Are users 2 and 3 notified of the waiting period? I think generally speaking, network companies are able to give you give users their relative position in the queue and indicate how long they will need to know, and they will need to wait until they are confirmed. So that the intention is to provide that an indication of how long it's likely to be. However, theoretically, in most circumstances, it should be within the 30-day working validity period of the unconditional offers. What can sometimes extend that waiting is where they go out, where offers are issued out of queue position. But again, that generally doesn't happen, but it can happen. So then there's another question on modifications here, Decusa and Cusk mods. So, Peter, are you able to answer this?
Yeah, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you, thanks.
All right, good. Yeah, so I've just put a little note down there that interactivity isn't currently coded into Decusa. So we're not likely to need a modification to Decusa to do that. But it's likely on the advice we've had so far that a Cusk mod probably is required. However, transmission companies think they may well be able to implement these changes prior to a full Cusk mod being in place. So sort of implement as a sort of trial. We're still working through the details of what that looks like. But yes, that's Decusa mod, probably not. Cusk mod, probably yes. All right.
That's great, thank you. Thanks.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've caught up with the questions, the Q&As, and in the chat. Yeah.
That's
right. Okay, so let's move on to scenario number 6. Multiple acceptances. Again, in this scenario, there are multiple acceptances. They cannot be validated until the status of the preceding connection has been established. So this scenario illustrates very well the the process of retaining your queue position. So offer 1, 2 and 3 have been sent out on the left hand side. Offer 1 is unconditional, 2 and 3 are conditional, and then acceptance is received by number 2 and number 3, applicant 2 and number 3 and applicant number 3. So they've both met stage 1, they've signed and sent in their acceptance within the validity period, but then acceptance 1 does accept, or offer number 1 is accepted by applicant number 1. We would withdraw or notify the applicants number 2 and 3 that they've been unsuccessful. Applicants number 2 and 3 have 10 days to reapply with the same, the same information for the same project to retain their relative queue positions in the scenario that there is another round of interactivity that is triggered. So I think that that slide was this slide and this scenario certainly covers off a couple of the questions that we had earlier on. So the outcome of this is when the unconditional offer is accepted, both conditional connection acceptances are withdrawn. Applicants are notified they are unsuccessful. Both customers reapply within 10 days and retain their original queue position, relevant if interactivity is subsequently activated. Okay. And now let's look at scenario number 7, multiple acceptances, different sizes. So to illustrate the principles of interactivity and the process, we've used fairly basic. The assumption in all of the previous slides is that each of the applications are about the same sort of size and only one of them can connect. In this scenario, but the reality is that what we have in network companies, and certainly my experience is that you can have multiple interactive quotations of a variety of sizes and generating capacities for DG, for example. And what we've got here on slide 7 just elaborates a little bit on that. So the multiple acceptances with different sizes. So in this scenario, there's multiple acceptances and the available capacity would allow more than one acceptance to be connected. However, queue order is maintained and are not validated. So in this scenario, let's say, for example, there's 10 megawatts available of capacity. Again, offer number 1 and 2 were sent. Each of those applications were for 8 megawatts. Offer number 1 was sent as unconditional. Offer number 2 was sent as conditional. So only one of those two can connect. Offer number 3, or applicant number 3, wanted 1 megawatt. They are still sent a conditional offer because they are part of this interactive queue. Offer number 2 and offer number 3 are accepted to stage 1, still as conditional, and then offer number 1 accepts at within their own validity period. So offers number 2 and 3 are withdrawn and are requested to reapply again. Now this is even despite offer number 3 theoretically being able to connect without any reinforcement. The queue position here takes precedent. So on confirmation that both applicants number 2 and 3 reapply within the 10 working days, they would again be queued at that for the subsequent any subsequent interactivity for example, reinforcement. Now, if in this scenario applicant 2 did not reapply, applicant 3 would and did reapply, applicant 3 would be at the front of the queue and would at that stage in isolation would probably not even be interactive. There's nothing else to be interactive with, and they are connecting with the existing assets. Okay, so that's a little bit more of a complex one, but that is the end of the scenarios. So I'm just going to display the Q&As, and what we'll do, I'll just take a few seconds and we'll just scan through and check whether the questions that have been asked have been answered, whether we've got any that are left over. But just take this opportunity that if you'd like to email any questions anonymously or more time to draft them, please, there's the email there that will come back to the working group for consideration and answer. So how are we doing, Courtney?
Yeah, we've got some new ones that have come through if you'd like to address them. So here's one. Is the A&D fee payable again if you reapply within 10 days?
Yeah. So that's why. So we mentioned that earlier on. You would need to check with your the network company. They may well apply the connection offer expenses again to that subsequent reapplication. It depends on the specific network company.
And there's another question here. Is there a risk that the current process could impact the growth of EV charge assets onto the network to help meet government ambitions? A possible example could be where a large charge point rollout is planned in one particular geographic area. Would this mean each unconditional applicant has to reapply over and over again to get the connection they require?
So you say is the current process. So currently all network companies apply an interactive process to manage those scenarios where there is limited, it's generally the capacity that is available. It can also be other things, fault levels in space, for example. Generally speaking, it's capacity that's available. Now, in some circumstances where the capacity gets, the available capacity is smaller and smaller, and then at some point close to where all the capacity is used, we have two applications at the same time. But it doesn't always happen. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes one application comes in and takes all of the available capacity, and the next application that comes in would need to have reinforcement. And that tends to happen quite a lot. So the current process, currently the network companies are applying a type of process to deal with it. So that's why I'm not quite sure what you mean by the current process. Can you just scroll up again a bit? Mm-hmm. Sorry. Mm-hmm. So could it impact the growth of EV charge assets onto the network? I don't think that this interactivity is not designed to slow things down. It's designed, if anything, to speed up who's connecting where there is very limited capacity, so that once that capacity, for example, once that capacity is allocated, all parties know where they stand and have to move on to, for example, reinforcement. I don't think that this interactivity process impacts EV charge assets detrimentally in any specific way. And then you've got, in an example where a large charge point rollout is planned in one particular area, would this mean each unconditional applicant has to reapply over and over again until they get the connection? Well, you know, if we receive an application and what is sent is a unconditional offer, we only send unconditional offers where interactivity is being triggered. If you receive an unconditional offer and accept it, that, you know, you get that connection. If you're putting in applications and you receive an unconditional offer and you don't accept it because you might want something different, when you reapply, you may be conditional. And at that point, the opportunity for the connection is with somebody that's ahead of you in the queue. So it's not clear why you would reapply over and over again when you receive unconditional offers. You know, an unconditional offer is, we're flagging, is, you know, your application is interactive. You need to bear in mind that if you don't accept this unconditional offer, if and when you come back for connection, you may have to pay reinforcement. That's, you know, that's the heads up for unconditional offers. And then, yeah.
So here's another question. Do you want me to read this one?
So I think you should be looking at the worst case scenario, reinforcement scenario, especially for generation connections who want to pay for reinforcement costs. This may be all up to the DNO, but it helps to contribute to zero carbon. But again, that was in the consultation in July of last year. That was proposed as a way to go forward with for developing a network company-wide process. That was considered, but it wasn't taken forward. We went forward with this conditional interactivity process. So scroll down and see what Peter has said. Yeah.
Yep.
Does this apply to NG or just DNO? So again, what does Peter's answer? So yeah, yeah, as I said a little bit earlier on, the approach that we're developing, the intention is to apply this to all transmission, all DNOs, and the interaction between their customers. So when do you anticipate this system will be enforced? The plan is to roll this out across all network companies by the end of 2020. So yeah, so, and is that the last question there?
I do believe that is the last question, yes.
Yeah, so the working group, which has representatives from all the DNOs and the transmission companies, have a number of objectives this year, including rolling this process out to all network companies by the end of 2020. There's a little bit of work for us to consider when one DNO, for example, has established this process and another DNO hasn't. You know, what happens in the handover period from one to the other. But the intention will be, and the target is, to have this in place in all network companies by the end of 2020.
Would you like us to flick through them quickly? See if there's anything we can touch on.
So we're just going to take a couple of minutes just to go through and check that we've covered everything off, and then we'll bring this to a close.
Will, is it worth just clarifying that we will we will collate all of the questions we've had and put some sort of written response out to all the questions? So sort of collating some of the answers we've already put down, but we'll get those published.
Yes, yeah, we're going to do what Peter just said, definitely. Okay, so yes, they will be, and like I say, if anyone has any other questions that they think of after, or things that perhaps need more thought, please email the address there for us to put in the guide.
And we really are looking to get as much feedback as possible and clarify as many questions as possible. So feel free to reach us through opennetworks@energynetworks.org. You're also welcome to give us at ENA a call because, yeah, we'd like to make this as clear as we possibly can. Say questions, it would be great if they could come through in the next week so that we can publish something in the next week.
So yeah, and just finally, the next steps, the plan is that we review the responses and look at the guide and get some sort of sign off at the DER steering group towards the end of February. The intention being to publish an ENA working guide, and there's a copy of the draft guide there on the right, by the end of March of 2020, March of this year. So, and we're going to issue the slides?
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
Yep, we're going to issue these slides.
Yeah. There's one question here come through for statement of works. Many DNO offers are subject to statement of works. How would the interactivity work with statement of works? Generally, the statement of works process is entered into after the offer is accepted, so the interactivity process happens before we enter into statement of works. So the two work together, but we will review this aspect this year. Good. Okay, Courtney, anything else from Courtney?
No, nothing else from me.
Peter, is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, nothing specifically from me.
Maybe that the recording will be available.
Yeah. So the recording will be available on the ENA website as well soon. So thank you very much for anybody that is still on the call. Thanks very much for joining and contributing. It was encouraging to see so many questions being asked, some very clever and important questions, and I appreciate you taking the time to contribute to this. Thank you very much.